The next part of the lesson deals with evaluating expressions. So when you are evaluating, you are taking something and substituting it into something else and then simplifying. So in this case, we are simplifying a number. So that means that our final answer should be another number. So to start with, when we are substituting, we want to be very careful that we don't accidentally lose a sign. So if you notice, it says evaluate each expression if x equals 4. So that means in these problems, whenever we see an x, we're going to replace it with a 4. And then y equals -2. So again, wherever we see a y, we're going to replace it with that -2. But we need to be very careful that we don't accidentally lose that negative somehow. So whenever you substitute, the best thing to do is to use parentheses around what you are substituting. So and what I mean by that, if we start with 5, I'm going to replace the x with 4, so both of the x's, and then I'm going to replace both y's with that -2. I'm going to put parentheses around the number that I'm replacing. So we have 3, and then instead of an x, I'm going to put parentheses there because I'm replacing it, and then I'm going to put what I'm replacing it with. So 4, and then -4 parenthesis, and then what I'm replacing y with, so that's our -2, and then plus parenthesis 4 minus parenthesis -2. So now we're just going to use our order of operations to start simplifying and get rid of our grouping symbols. Now our parentheses are a grouping symbol, so typically we would get rid of that first, but since it's down to one number, it really means that we're doing some type of multiplication. So between 3 in our group here, we're multiplying. So 3 times 4 would be 12. So now we no longer need those parentheses. And then here we have -4 times -2. So that's going to become a +8. So plus 8. And then here in front, even though we don't write it, this is really a 1. So we're taking 1 times 4, which is just a +4. And then again, even though we don't write it, there's that 1 here. And since it's a minus, that means that it's negative. So -1 times -2 is a +2. And now we're just adding from left to right. So 12 plus 8 is 20. And then we would have plus 4 plus 2. 20 plus 4 is 24 plus 2. And then 24 plus 2 gives us 26 for our final answer. So now we're just going to do that same process. So again, substituting, so 4, then we -2, and 4. Now really, since there's not a number in front and these don't have any negatives, for this one, if we do kind of a little bit of a side note here, it's okay not to use parentheses in this case. So because I know that I'm just taking each one of them times a 1, so it's not going to change what they are. So I can write this as 4 plus a -2, and then divided by 4 if that's easier. And then we would just simplify that sign here to be 4 minus 2 divided by 4. Okay? So that's another way that you could do this problem without the parentheses. And as you notice here, so if we start simplifying this, again, we're just taking 1 times each of these. So this would become 4 plus a -2 divided by 4. So really we're going to end up with the same thing here. Okay? And again, our next step in this process would be to simplify this sign part. So this is really the same as 4 minus 2 divided by 4. Now if I'm doing order of operations, that means that we have to do division first. So we're going to ignore this 4 here. So really we're taking -2 divided by 4. Well, that doesn't divide nicely, and I don't want to deal with decimals. So instead of using our division sign, another way that we could write it is as a fraction. So this is really the same thing as saying 4 minus 2 over 4. Well now, since it's a fraction, we are using our fraction rules to continue to simplify. So I'm going to kind of partition this off and start my work over here. So the first thing I'm going to do next is to simplify my fraction. So we're really looking at 4 minus 1/2. So now we have to combine a fraction. So in order to combine fractions, we need a common denominator. So that means I'm going to put this over 1, and then our common denominator between 1 and 2 will be 2. So to switch that to be a 2, that means I have to multiply the top and bottom by 2. So I'm just going to write that off to the side here. You don't need to write that. You can do that in your head. But to continue now, so 2 times 4 would be 8. 2 times 1 is 2, minus 1/2. So now, since we're subtracting, we're looking at the numerator, so the top parts of the fraction. So we need to take 8 minus 1, which would give us 7, and then the denominator stays the same. And we can't reduce that any further, so 7/2 would be our final simplified answer for that. All right, next one. So again, starting off by substituting. So this time I'm going to use parentheses since we have more than just a positive 1 in front of our numbers. So we would have negative parenthesis, then our 4 again, so 4 squared, minus 2 parenthesis, and then since inside our parenthesis here, this is really a 1 in front, I don't need another set of parentheses. Now if you want to write that and it helps you, go ahead and do that. This time I'm not going to. So I'm just going to plug in my negative 2. Or excuse me, since it's an x, we want to use 4. So we're going to substitute 4 in. So 4 plus 1. So again, now we are going to use order of operations to simplify. So again, we start with parentheses. So that means that we are combining this. And then if we could, we would simplify this, but we can't do anything more to simplify this set. So this will still be a negative on the outside. And then 4 squared minus 2 times 5. So next thing is exponents. So that means that we have to deal with this. So this is 4 squared. Now notice how the negative is on the outside. So that means in this case, because it's on the outside, we're really going to ignore it when we square it. So 4 squared would be 16. So this becomes 16, and then that negative is going to go in front of it. So we really have a negative 16. And then, since we do multiplication from left to right, we can do this next. So negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. And now we can just combine. So negative 16 minus 10 is going to give us negative 26 as our final answer. All right, last simplifying problem. So again, just substituting. Now, since this one doesn't have a number in front of it, I'm not going to use parentheses. I'm just going to write 4 in its place. So 4, 3 minus, and then this time, because we're subtracting, and I don't want to accidentally lose a negative, I'm going to use parentheses this time. So parenthesis, and then we are putting in negative 2, and then we have this extra parenthesis here that we need to remember, and then the squared, plus, and again, because we're squaring something, I'm going to use parentheses again when I substitute. So I'm replacing y with negative 2, and then we still have the squared. Okay. So now we're simplifying. So again, starting with our parentheses. So that means that we're starting in this group right here. So to start with, we would distribute our negative in. So this will become 4, and then 3 plus 2. Again, that's squared on the outside. And then we would still have plus. And since this is its own group, we can also simplify that right away. So this time, our negative is on the inside of our parentheses. So that means we're really taking negative 2 times negative 2. So this term right here will become a positive 4. So now we're back to our parentheses. So we want to combine the 3 and the 2 together. So that's going to give us 5. And then now we need to take care of our exponent. So 5 squared is going to be 25. And I'm going to leave that in parentheses because we still have this number on the outside. So we haven't actually multiplied it yet. So now 4 times 25 is going to give us 100. So 100 plus 4. And then our final answer will be 104. All right, our last example deals with using formulas. So typically right now when we are using a formula, it's because we know enough of the missing variables to evaluate to find a number. Okay? So if we read through this, it says the formula for the volume of a cone V equals 1/3 pi r squared h. So if we kind of go back to geometry, let's refresh what all those letters mean. So V means volume. And then pi, so that's our 3.14. R, in this case, is going to stand for the radius of something. And h usually stands for the height. Okay. So again, we're looking for the volume of a cone. Gives us the formula, and this can be used to approximate the volume of a tornado. So find the approximate volume of the tornado. So this word approximate here is actually very important to this problem. So that means that we're not going to have an exact answer. We're probably going to have a decimal. And we know that because of this pi. So this is also telling us to substitute in 3.14 for the pi when we start, or to use the pi key on your calculator to start simplifying. So when I do this, I'm actually going to use the pi key on my calculator. So now we're just going to use our picture here. So when we look at this, so here's our tornado in blue here. And then we have our cone shape, which is how we know to use this volume formula. Even though that's given to us, that would indicate that. So the radius is coming from the top. So this part right here is our radius. So I'm going to write that. So we know that R is going to be equal to 75. And then this other number here, this is going to be our height. So that means our H is equal to 225. So since we know R and H, that means that we're able to find the volume. So now we're just going to use our evaluating properties to do that. So V equals 1/3 pi, and then I'm replacing R with 75 and H with 225. So now we're just going to go through our simplifying process. So V equals 1/3 pi, and then 75 squared, so that's kind of a big one, so if you need to use your calculator, that's fine, is going to be 5,625 times 225. So the next thing that I'm going to multiply together, since the order of multiplication doesn't matter, I'm going to start with these two numbers. So V equals 1/3 pi times, and then we're taking 5,625 times 225, which gives us, let's see here, 1,265,625, and again I'm using my calculator to help me. So it looks like it's 1,265,625. So now again multiplying, I'm going to actually kind of jump over my pi and I'm going to go to this 1/3. Now if you're using your calculator, you can just use your divide key. So I'm going to type in this number and then my divide key by 3. So V equals 421875. So again, if I add in my commas, we have 421,875 pi. So right now, this would be considered our exact answer, and we could stop. But our problem tells us to approximate. So now I'm going to take this number times pi. And I'm going to use the pi symbol on my calculator. If you don't have that, then you would use 3.14. So times pi. So after we do that, we get 1,325,359.401. And then I'm going to add on my label here. So back, if we look, M, so meters. And then since we're dealing with volume, it's going to be cubed. So this would be our final answer for this problem. And that will conclude Lesson 1-1.